There isn't a word that's strong enough to tell you how I feel. All I can say is, it is over. The DNA tests are in, and they are conclusive. And they've left me angry and baffled. A quick synopsis. The Ohio Innocence Project claimed Samuel J. Herring did not brutalize Phyllis Cottle, that police got the wrong man, that prosecutors, the judge, the jury all got it wrong, that Samuel J. Herring was innocent. The Ohio Innocence Project asked for DNA tests on evidence recently discovered in a remote storage area in Summit County, Ohio. The most compelling evidence? Semen found on the crotch of Phyllis Cottle's pants and underwear. Those items have been in storage for the past 39 years, but the DNA was salvageable. And yeah, it tells a whopper of a story. According to Summit County Prosecutor Sherry Bevan Walsh, forensic scientists were able to match that DNA to a suspect. If that DNA did not match Herring's, he gets a new trial. If the DNA test came back inconclusive, Herring likely would still get a new trial because the Innocence Project had another suspect in mind, one whose criminal history allegedly more closely matched the crimes against Phyllis. But there is a match. That semen found on Phyllis's clothing that could have changed everything, that could have freed a man unjustly held behind bars for nearly 40 years, belonged to Samuel J. Herring. Turns out, beyond a shadow of a doubt, police, prosecutors, and the jury did not get it wrong. They got it right. The DNA results showed a 1 in 1 trillion match. Here's former prosecutor Emily Pelfrey, my legal guide.
It did surprise me. And I think that when we spoke last about this, I think in some ways trying to prepare you for the opposite result.
The Ohio Innocence Project had a compelling argument and recently discovered DNA, so I prepared for a potential bombshell development and emotional pain for Phyllis's family and for a man who was possibly unjustly incarcerated for nearly 40 years. So the DNA test came back. I'm trying to get it. And it said it was a 1 in 1 trillion match, a 1 in 1 trillion. What does that mean?
That you did it. I mean, and two, even if it was a smaller number, because 1 in a trillion is huge. But even if we were looking at, I don't know, 1.5 million or 1 in a million, still there has to be some explanation as to how it got there. And if he is denying that he was ever there and never knew her, well, then it should be none. So this number really does boil down to the fact that his DNA was in a place where it was not supposed to be. It was proven to be his. So case closed.
I wish Phyllis was still with us. I wonder what she would say. I know what I would say. What a fucking monster. To sit there, to proclaim your innocence when you know you did it. To put Phyllis's family through hell again, to tarnish the legacy of a true hero, Phyllis Cottle, to, in the words of the Summit County prosecutor, manipulate the people of the Ohio Innocence Project. What the hell? August 1994. Samuel Herring had been locked up in an Ohio correctional institution for 10 years. A decade before, in June of 1984, Herring had been sent to prison for up to 330 years for a horrific crime. Akron detectives say he carjacked, raped, and robbed Phyllis Cottle, then used a serrated knife to stab her in both eyes, blinding her. It was his way, they said, to make sure she would never be able to identify him. Then, detectives say, Herring tied up Phyllis, left her in the backseat of her car, and set it on fire. Phyllis Cottle escaped that burning car and lived to testify against her alleged attacker. In little more than a week, Herring was arrested and then convicted on all counts. Through it all, Herring never admitted guilt. He was angry, bitter, and scary. Here's Phyllis's daughter, Diane. Did he ever admit to doing it?
No. He was writing letters to my mom saying that, he had the wrong guy and she's all wrong. Basically, and then the letters kind of turned to a more nasty nature, saying that she was going to burn in hell because, she got him in prison and he's innocent and blah, 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 blah. And I finally told her, I said, you know what? Don't even open them. Just throw them in the trash.
Fast forward to that August day in 1994, to the first time Herring faced the Ohio Parole Board to argue his way out of prison. He insisted that he did not hurt Phyllis Cottle, that he had never met that lady who was blinded. Not his thing, he asserted. Here's our voice of the court.
I wouldn't carry a knife. I was always a gunman, an armed robber. I never went without a gun.
According to the Akron Beacon-Journal, Herring was animated as he, quote, proclaimed his innocence. He jumped out of his chair, waved his arms, and spoke so quickly his words came out in bursts. Then he shaped his forefinger and thumb into the shape of a pistol, pointed his index finger at the 10 or so members of the parole board, and told them why he preferred a gun over a knife to commit crime.
When I told people what to do, they did what I said because I had the power.
When I decided to share Phyllis Cottle's story, it never entered my mind that police got the wrong guy. Still, it puzzled me that Samuel Herring never admitted guilt, even if it meant getting out of prison before he died there. And the fact Herring was willing to ask for DNA testing, I mean, who would do that if they actually did the crime? That's just insane. More when we return. Join James Woolner on a journey through a gripping true crime tale. James is a talented storyteller. He has a way of exploring cases with compassion. His stories are deeply researched. James does the hard work. He talks to victims' family members, law enforcement, and even the perpetrator's family. He helps us understand that crime touches us in different ways, painful ways, but ways that are important for us to understand. I think you could describe Dakota Spotlight as an expert blend of storytelling, investigative journalism, and thorough research. But where to start? Well, I would start with Season 9, The Mandan Murders. James takes us on a roller coaster ride of emotion. Set in Mandan, North Dakota, this 9-part series offers listeners a profound journey into the depths of the human experience amidst tragedy. James even talks with the family of the convicted killer, Chad Isaac. Trust me, this story will touch you. Give Dakota Spotlight a listen.
True terrors of horror, bizarre happenings, unexplainable events. On our podcast, Disturbed, terror takes center stage. Each episode is a journey into the darkest corners of human existence, delving into bone-chilling tales of kidnappings, serial killers, maniacs, and the very essence of your worst nightmares coming to life on this weekly true horror show. Disturbed is not for the faint of heart. It's an exploration of real, unadulterated horror sourced from everyday people. Each episode is a descent into the macabre, where we narrate stories that will leave you on the edge of your seat and crawling in your skin. We navigate the disturbing narratives that lurk in the shadows, offering a raw and unfiltered listen into the most terrifying aspects of the human experience. Enter at your own risk and let the unsettling tales unfold in the haunting realm of Disturbed. And remember, listeners, stay safe out there.
I'm stunned that someone could, as in Samuel J. Herring, could sit there in a wheelchair before TV cameras and say he was innocent, knowing full well that he wasn't.
Yeah. And I can't attest to the psyche behind that as to why or how someone can do that. I've sat across the table from plenty of people that said they didn't do it, and it's overwhelming evidence shows that they did do it.
I mean, I know, and I hear what you say, that you sat across from people who knew they were guilty and they just lied to your face. But to say that the DNA found on the victim's clothing wasn't yours, knowing that that's just delusional.
Yeah, I don't know how you did, unless you just thought, well, it's just such old evidence that perhaps it won't test a certain way.
Maybe. A few weeks after Herring was arrested and jailed before trial, one of the lead detectives in the case, Chris Contos, decided to interview two of Herring's cellmates. One of them told Contos he asked Herring, quote, why he hadn't taken a semen test. Herring said the lady had, quote, oil poured all over her, so there was no, quote, evidence of semen. At the time, this information had not been reported in the media. Only the suspect would have known that there were efforts to contaminate or destroy physical evidence. Maybe Herring didn't realize that by 2023, DNA testing would be so advanced, it wouldn't matter if the semen had been contaminated. Still, and I get it, I'm trying to apply logic to a guy who clearly has psychological problems. But why? Why ask for DNA tests if you knew you did it? Here's Casey Jordan, a criminologist and forensic psychologist.
So I'm going to answer your question, but let me tell you who he reminds me of. A man named Lawrence Singleton, who in 1978 horrifically raped a teenage hitchhiker in California, chopped off her arms with a hatchet or an axe and threw her over a 30-foot cliff, and she managed to stanch the bleeding by shoving her stubs in mud and climbing out of the desert and the woods for 3 miles to where she was found. So what always reminds me of this is how Phyllis really does remind me of Lawrence Singleton's victim as well. Just unstoppable, and showed up in court with her 2 prosthetic arms and made sure that she testified against him. And it also reminds me of it because he was given, I don't think he could get more than 12 years for that rape and attack and the mutilation of this girl. I mean, ridiculously short sentence. And he was out after a few years, again, just like Herring. But what reminds me of it the most is that Lawrence Singleton got out and everyone was like, he's an old man. He never admitted to his attack on the girl. And the probation and parole officers who knew him, who worked with him after he was released from prison, said it's as if every day he wakes up and it's Groundhog Day for him. He doesn't believe he did it. He has no memory of doing it. He has blocked it from his memory. He feels no remorse because he just says he didn't do it. But of course we know he did it. So it is a level of self-brainwashing that's legitimate. When Herring says that he didn't do it, and that's why he can't admit to it, you have to consider for one moment that he has succeeded in a process of self-brainwashing. We call it physiologia fantastica, where you actually convince yourself of a new truth to the extent that you could even pass a lie detector test. So to me, it doesn't indicate for 1 second that he is factually innocent. It just makes me think that whatever mental illness he has succeeded in completely recreating his reality to where he didn't do it at all. The end of that story with Lawrence Singleton is that everyone said, oh, he's an old man. Don't worry. Why do you have to keep him in prison? You know, he's in his late 60s. He's never going to rape and, attack and cut the arms off of another girl. But in fact, he did. And when he was 70 years old, he killed a woman, a mother of 3, at 70.
By 1994, when an agitated Herring told the parole board he could not have stabbed and blinded Phyllis Cottle because the crime didn't fit his M.O., because his weapon of choice was a gun, not a knife, I had left Akron for a TV job at a bigger city, where the viewers were not interested in Samuel Herring. Besides, the Ohio Parole Board didn't buy Herring's M.O. argument. He was denied parole in 1994, and then denied parole again 10 years later, and 10 years after that. Phyllis Cottle appeared at every one of Herring's parole board hearings until her death in 2013. Phyllis's family carried the torch after that. In 2019, they collected thousands of signatures and sent them to the parole board. And they plan to do it again when Herring next came up for parole in 2029. I talked with Diane, Phyllis's daughter, and Diane's daughter, Drew, in 2020.
So we just fought this last year. He gets parole every 10 years. And I think that's the thing. Now, she fought so hard to keep him in there, but we have to fight even harder because now that she has passed on, people are like, oh, what's it matter? Well, it does matter because he has a vengeance. He is angry. That's clear. I mean, he's still being violent. Is he going to stop with just her? Is he going to keep coming? That's why we make it such a point to get everyone that we know to write letters, emails, phone calls, all of it.
I know, the Ohio Innocence Project. How did they get it wrong? Phyllis's family released a statement to the media. Quote, "We would also like to ask the Innocence Project/Marshall Project to vet any future cases more carefully and with better due diligence. We hope with a better due diligence, both projects, as well as Cleveland's News Channel 5, will keep in mind that their actions affect others in ways they may not realize or understand, including but not limited to the victims' families. The Innocence Project should not be the reason why victims of crimes are afraid to come forward." I understand why Phyllis's family released that statement. Phyllis Cottle, who was raped, robbed, and blinded, had every reason to be afraid to come forward. But she found the courage to tell her truth in vivid detail. Should this outcome tarnish the Innocence Project's work in any way?
No, I don't think so. I don't. And in looking again at this case and some of the holes that existed and the fact that there were some things that were a little wonky about this, some of the evidence gathering, I'm not going to lie, but I think that their reputation in this case, they challenged what they believed were accurate holes. They challenged the identity based on similar acts committed by someone in that same environment. And I don't think that it was a wrong thing for them to do. I think what they've done is they've also shown that the eyewitness, I shouldn't say eyewitness, but the fact that we have a victim who was so strong and so willing to work alongside of these detectives, I think it just bolsters her even that much more.
I know, I was like, yeah, go Phyllis.
I know. And her family has to be even more proud of her because of this. She was right. And even if there's always some little doubt that exists in the head, right? And even if the family members saw this, maybe someplace in the back of their head, they're like, man, there's just a lot of similarities going on. This just closes the door on that. And they can say, you know what, mom did everything that she was supposed to do. And my mom is a badass. And she was right.
Yep, that DNA evidence slams the door shut on any doubt that Herring is guilty. And Phyllis? She was a badass, but I always knew that. Stay tuned for more developments. We'll be releasing episodes as fast as I can dig up new information. And thank you for listening. Carol Costello Presents Blind Rage is a signature show of the Killer Podcast Network. If you enjoy this series, please subscribe and rate it on your favorite listening apps. And discover more great true crime and paranormal programming at killerpodcast.com. And if you want to discover more about this case, follow me on Instagram at Carol Costello. You'll find pictures of Phyllis, newspaper reports, crime scene photos, and more. Blind Rage is a co-production of Evergreen Podcasts and Carol Costello. This episode was produced by Chris Aiola and me, Carol Costello. Additional thanks to audio engineer Sean Rule-Hoffman, contributor Nyjah Galladay, production director Brigid Coyne, and executive producer Gerardo Orlando. Original music is composed by Timothy Law Snyder. All of the information in this podcast came from my memories of the event. Phyllis Cottle, her family members and friends, former law enforcement, prosecutors, former and current journalists, police reports, and court documents. I've tried to tell this story factually to the best of my ability, but sometimes memory fails. It's been a long time, but my goal is simple. Phyllis was an amazing woman, and her story of courage should be shared.
I'm an American vigilante. I have a question for you. What would you do if someone you cared about was abducted, taken from you? Would you call me? Would you care about how I got them back? Download American Vigilante now.